June 26th. This is the Moody Park area timber sale sequel. This is the landing area where we had logs piled last February and trucks picking them up. The area is obviously free of logs now. The City Parks Department ran a York rake over it, so the area is in good shape, and you hardly know that there was a lot of saw logs and pulp piled down here last winter. We'll take a look at the rest of the timber sale area and see how things are developing since the closeout of the harvest. This is our main haul road that we ran the forwarder up and down, and it's free of brush. It's been York raked, so it's pretty easy for foot traffic now, and leads into the timber sale area. This was a cut to length harvest, so the brush is clipped off the trees, or the limbs are clipped off the trees and left on the ground. And there is old harvesting that has been done in here. I will zoom in on this old stump right here. This is probably from 35 or 40 years ago. And then right near it you can see a fresh cut stump. And then in the background you can see the nice younger pine trees that we've left to grow for the future. I'll zoom in on this distant stump. That gives you an idea of the character of trees that we cut in here. In many cases the white pine was multi-stem trees. We've tried to leave the straighter, younger trees for them to grow and into larger trees, which could be available for saw logs sometime in the distant future. Again, here you can see the multi-stemmed trees that were cut. And the old stumps from past harvesting. There is a fair amount of brush. However, we took great pains to make sure the trails were left open, and all the existing trails are easily passable. The hardwood stumps have already started to resprout, and this little oak stump, you can see that the fresh green shoots have already been nipped off by deer browsing on the new growth, and that'll be beneficial for the deer in here for several years. They'll make use of these sprouts for food, particularly at this time of year. This job was done with what we call cut-to-length equipment. That means the trees are felled in the woods by a processing machine that not only strips the limbs off but also cuts them to the final length of the product, and then they're picked up by a forwarder and moved out to the landing area where they're loaded by trucks. And we elected to do this on a cut-to-length basis because it allows us to keep the tree spacing much closer than if we had skidded the whole tree out. We would have had much wider trails and would have had fewer remaining trees per acre. Some trees we saved for wildlife value. Here's one marked with a W for that very reason. And I'll pan around to the left. You can see the area that was harvested, and we're immediately adjacent to a well-used hiking trail. Saved trees were marked with a horizontal stripe. Here's a nice 16-inch white pine, and it also has some neighbors that are white pines. The hiking trail winds through this area, and immediately adjoining it is a area that we harvested. Most of the stems that came out were pulpwood quality. Some were soft, some were sawlog quality. We've retained a mix of species in here. Here's a red oak. That's an excellent tree for both lumber, firewood, and for wildlife. And these areas will green up considerably in the years ahead just several growing seasons will make a big difference in here. The hiking trail winds through the harvest in this spot, and we were careful to keep it open. We also took care to save these white oak trees. This is a relatively unusual species for this part of New Hampshire. It's pushing the northern edge of the range of white oak. So we hung on to those just for some diversity. They're also a good wildlife tree. We've tried to keep some good trees that can grow and develop well in the future, and that's the case with these white pine in here particularly. Moody Park and the adjoining piece that's owned by the city where the timber sale took place are home to all three of New Hampshire's native pine species. The predominant species, this one here, soft green needles in bunches of 5, is white pine. We saw the red pine in the harvest area, and then around the old ball field on the city there's a handful of pitch pines. They're a sort of a scraggly looking tree with short, stiff green needles, and they're often associated with forest fires. And this handful right here in Claremont are the only pitch pines that I know of in the city of Claremont. We've hung on to these just for that reason, and it's just nice to have some diversity. Here's a little more intimate look at a pitch pine. You can see they have a rough bark, kind of looks like the back of an alligator. This one has some sprouting occurring from the side of the trunk. They tend to be rough and heavy branch trees. My name is Dennis McKenney. I work with New England Forestry Consultants as a consulting forester and a land surveyor. I was responsible for supervising the timber sale adjoining Moody Park, and we're just about to leave the sale area. This red blazed line is the traditional way in which woodland boundaries are marked. The city owns over 2,000 acres of parks and timberland, and we have blazed and painted the 20 plus miles of perimeter boundary around each of the parcels.